Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live with CXPA. I am Gabe Smith, CCXP, and I'm the Content Manager and Associate Director for the Customer Experience Professionals Association. And I am so excited to be back with you on our live stream broadcast and getting to spend some time with you today, my favorite people in the world, CX professionals. So let's get us started in the comments section. You know, I love to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from today in the world? Love to see the global diversity of CX professionals and hear from you and where you are in the world. You know, it's hard to believe that we are coming up on the end of the year, the beginning of a new year. It's really a great time to talk about how we can achieve greater alignment. And maybe what that means for you is greater alignment between your personal goals and the choices that you're making on a daily basis. And I know that is for me. Maybe it's greater alignment among members of your CX team. Maybe it's a greater alignment between your CX goals and operational realities. It's also perhaps a great time to talk about greater alignment between customer experience and employee experience. And today we're going to hear from a phenomenal guest host and a great lineup of panelists who've really achieved that alignment to create more engaged employees and loyal customers. So want to hear from you. Just taking a look at the comments here. We have Colette tuning in from Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Colette. We have Jessica, who's tuning in from Northern Virginia. We have Betty tuning in from Nigeria. We have Janki Patel tuning in from Washington, D.C. We have Cynthia Kumar tuning in from London. Pat Gibbons joining us from Indianapolis. Lots of folks here from Indianapolis. That is great. We've got Cape Town, South Africa, Nigeria, San Francisco, Toronto, South Florida. Love seeing that. And as a reminder, you know, as you watch the discussion today, these broadcasts are really at their best when we get a chance to hear from you, when our panelists get a chance to respond to your questions and to hear your comments. So put those comments in. We're going to have time to have a little bit of Q&A. So make sure to get those comments in there. So without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome our guest host. Steve Walker is the chairman and CEO at Walker and the host of the CX Leader podcast. So Steve, take it away.
Hey, welcome and good day to you wherever you are in the world. It's really fascinating to see the feed come in and truly how global our profession is. I appreciate all of you taking some time to spend this hour with us. I think we have a great lineup of resources and a great topic today. And I also just want to take this opportunity to thank Gabe Smith, who does a great job, along with all the pros at the CXPA, of putting these CXPA live programs together. We're just honored that we get to be a part of that today. So our topic today is combining CX and EX. And I think this is a topic that has really gotten a lot of energy lately. For those of you who listen to our podcast, the CX Leader podcast, we've done quite a bit on this topic in recent weeks and months. And I think it's somewhat indicative of kind of the state of the art of our profession and where we're at. You know, it's not really necessarily a new idea, but I think the combination of the emergence of the CX profession, the C-suite fascination and interest in the types of information and insights that we can bring to the business, combined with the technologies, the platforms, the ability to store data and to use data, have really kind of created a renaissance in this concept. But we'll talk a little bit about the history of this topic. And we have Troy Powell, my colleague and friend, who's authored a report on this that we'll reference here a couple times during the session that you will be able to download, some really good research and sort of academic look at the topic. And then I'm particularly proud to have two practitioners who have actually gone down this journey in a pretty advanced fashion. And I think that all of you will see some good insights and things that you'll be able to apply. Just a couple things, just a couple thoughts that I had about CX and EX. Again, it sort of makes sense that you would want to combine, your employee experience data with your customer experience data. But I think it makes even more sense when you think about some of the business models that we have today, where they are more relationship based, where the value that we're bringing to the customer tends to have a service element to it. And therefore, you really can't separate kind of the employee experience from the customer experience. Historically, these two functions have been siloed within organizations. CX tended to be owned by marketing, sales, quality, customer experience today. And employee experience tended to be owned more by the HR function. So it was never really designed to talk together. But again, because of the interest in this topic at kind of the highest levels within our organizations, I think we're finding that more and more organizations are going to have the opportunity to put those things together. Troy's going to talk about how you do that, and then we're going to actually see a couple of examples of some organizations that have moved that down the field a little bit. It's also, I think, important to realize that this broader concept about what we talk about as experience management. At Walker, we have a tagline. We say we believe everyone deserves an amazing experience. And that extends beyond customers. So we're really not talking just about customers or even employees. You think about some industries, there's really, really incredibly complex relationships. Think about healthcare, for example, where you have different people paying for the service from those who receive the service, and maybe even somebody who's making the purchase recommendation separate from the person that's actually going to receive the service. Or you have people that are, tasked with looking after their loved ones who can't make those sorts of decisions. So we can get into very, very complicated relationship situations, and that just makes our whole job that much more important as we pull those things together. I'm going to go ahead and start and kick this thing off and introduce my friend and colleague, Troy Powell. And Troy shouldn't need too much of an introduction. He's a frequent guest on the CX Leader podcast and also a real thought leader in our industry. So welcome, Troy.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for the intro. It's nice to be here.
Hey, nice to have you, Troy. Your background looks familiar to me.
I know. We're not in the same room, but
no.
Same background view.
Well, the miracles and wonders of virtual world here. So, hey, thanks again for being a part of this show today and for bringing your expertise. The first thing I think of, and we've known each other a long time and we've been doing this a long time, but this concept of EX and CX, putting those two things together is not really such a new idea, is it?
No, definitely not. And I think you go back, obviously, to the formalization, perhaps, of it with the service profit chain. And, there's a HBR article and a book about it in the 90s and a Sears case study. So Sears was kind of the case study used for that, which obviously we saw how well that worked for them 20 some years later. But at the time, it was a differentiator that they were pretty proud of. And obviously, existed well before that as well. So, you go back to a long history of viewing the importance of the employee to the customer, to delivering the customer experience, but then the importance of both the employee and the customer to ultimate performance of a business. And that was the goal of all that, was to be like, how do businesses build sustainable profit? How can they become differentiated in the industry and in their market? And so the importance of customers and employees to that was, been seen for a long time.
And simply stated, the service profit chain, which you said, I think you told me before, it was 1994. that the article was published in HBR, but it was pretty groundbreaking at the time. And, I think that kind of the line they tried to draw is engaged employees or satisfied employees create satisfied customers, which creates better financial performance. And it was really quite an empirical study for those early days.
Yeah. Yeah, they did try to build it not just as a conceptual model, but then to actually put the data behind it and prove out the links, which they did to some degree. It was always a hard one to really prove out because there's so many intervening factors, but found throughout time that not only did that chain work, but also the feedback of how engaged, or how loyal customers can help with employee engagement as well, and performance can help with both. And so this idea it's also a cyclical process, and a circle of effects was also true.
Well, and I think we'll try to emphasize this point when we get our other guests on the show today and we talk about the actual applications. But if you go back a generation, Sears was kind of the Amazon of its time. Families went to Sears for a variety of things that they needed in their household. And there was a Sears store literally everywhere, across this country. So they had this, I like to call it a distributed business model, where the same customers went to the same store and interacted with the same employees. So you had this nice, tight sort of model where you could link up the employee and the customer and the financial data all together. And that's really what we're talking about today electronically, right?
Right. No, yeah, very, very good point. And, I think it is the other piece that the service profit chain brought in, which we're not talking about today, but I think is always interesting, is the supply chain stance of it. So how are we getting the goods to the customers? Because Sears obviously had this amazing, catalog business as well.
Yep.
And so anyway, there's a lot of things to learn. We often, poo-poo history when it gets too far back, especially in the business world, right? That idea that's 20 years old or 2 years old, is past its time, but you can learn a lot from looking back.
Yeah, there's that old saying, those who are who don't learn the lessons of history may be doomed to repeat them, right?
Precisely.
Hey, let's. We have this great report that's available, and it's going to be. We'll put that in the feed of where you can download your report, which you were the primary author of. It's titled "Effectively Combining CX and EX." But I think we've got a graphic here that we're going to show. This just sort of a kind of an overall thought process, or how you might think about doing this, and maybe you could just describe a little bit about that and some of the elements in there.
For sure. And what we tried to do with this report, again, this is not a new concept. It's definitely not something new to how you want to think about CX or EX, the business discipline in general. But one thing we've noticed is, even with all the discussion of it over the year, there still is not a whole lot of interplay between the two in most organizations. They're still housed in different silos, and lip service at times given to the intersection, but very little actually done. And so we wanted to create a framework of sorts that could help to guide organizations as they walk down this path. I think one of the things we're guilty of in CX often is acknowledging the employee and their importance, but almost treating them like, students or children, or, they're people that we have to monitor, right? They're a cog in the sense of, all right, our employees had better not mess up the experience our customers are getting, and we're watching, right? It's almost a little bit of that sense, more so than treating them as kind of co-equal partners in this. And so the integration, in this case, not of just integrating employees and acknowledging their role, but integrating employee engagement, or EX, as a discipline. And I think there is a difference there, in that we're acknowledging that the goals of EX, the goals of employee engagement, are of equal importance to the goals of customer engagement. So viewing these employees as co-equal partners, ones whom we need to determine, are we enabling them? Are we empowering them? Are we resourcing them to be able to deliver the experience that we want them to deliver? as opposed to monitoring them to make sure they are. I haven't run into very many employees at all who don't want to deliver a good experience, right? Employees want customers to be happy. And so bringing them into the process to understand what's keeping them from being able to do that is critical. Not just acknowledging that, yes, you need to do this, but how can we enable you? So I think, when we talk about it, that idea of EX or employee engagement being a co-equal partner in this is a critical aspect to this whole framework. So what we talked about was, one, really the importance that you can't combine CX and EX if you don't have one or the other, right? So ultimately you need to start in those silos and develop something. And so, we spend some time talking about what does it look like to, have kind of a CX program and an EX program that has some depth to it, has some content that's kind of thinking about things in the right way. And so, looking at it at multiple layers, multiple levels to say, hey, we need to understand the overall health and relationship and engagement of customers and employees. But we also need to get down into the weeds a little bit, understand touch points and journeys and the life cycle and interaction points on both sides. And then we also need to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of unstructured data, a whole lot of ways that we can get insights from both employees and customers that don't fall into what we often think about in CX and EX, which are surveys and other more formalized methods. And so, we spend time talking about those in both the CX and EX world. What might that look like? But then, real focus here being that middle tier or that middle pillar, which is the combination of those two. And there's plenty of evidence showing how companies that excel at CX and excel at EX, outperform those who maybe only do one or the other well. Well, we think, and there's not a whole lot of evidence because there's not a lot of companies doing it well, right? But that the combination of those two adds even more performance, more differentiation. And so saying, hey, great, you have good EX, great, you have good CX, that's important. But now if you can leverage that in some combined way, we get a duplicative or multiplicative impact of those efforts. And so, we talk about that in these various levels that how often do you see employee engagement and customer experience, customer relationship scores reported in the same presentation to executives? Not often, right? So think about how do we do that? How do we, look at different sites and locations and how they're doing on both? How do we dive in to understand touch points and to understand the full 360 view of these interactions that occur and what's important there? So that's, I think, a big piece of this that we are trying to push further and provide ideas and concepts that then practitioners can go and actually do them.
Good. There's a lot of chat on the comments about getting that report downloaded. I encourage everybody to do that. But you've really laid out a great model here that I think we can work with. And I want to now turn to a couple of our practitioners. You'll hang around. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll bring you back, Troy. But thanks for teeing up the topic so well. Hey, my next guest on the LinkedIn Live is Jennifer Percival. She is the VP of Sales and Marketing for Medxcel, a really interesting integrated healthcare company. So let me bring Jennifer on, and she can explain a little bit more about their business and how they've integrated CX and EX. Hey, Jennifer, welcome.
Good afternoon, Steve. Good to see you.
Great. So grateful that you'll come on and share your story with our LinkedIn Live group today. You really have been a visionary in this effort and are way down the road compared to a lot of the people in the organizations that they're working with today. So just really happy to have you on. Your business is so interesting. Just give us a quick overview on Medxcel so our guests and listeners can learn a little bit more about your business.
Well, thank you. Medxcel is an integrated facilities management provider in the healthcare space. We provide services to hospitals and healthcare organizations across the United States. Everything from plant management, building maintenance, to planning, design, and construction, strategic planning for their facilities needs. We serve over 160 sites across the U.S. In some capacity in the facilities arena.
So again, back to my earlier comments about the complexity in healthcare, I mentioned that specifically to kind of tee this discussion up, but your employees would be at these various hospital sites and interacting with the doctors, nurses, the hospital staff that are employed there, as well as the patients' loved ones, guests, visitors, suppliers, et cetera. It's a very integrated model, right?
It absolutely is. And one that we started to recognize the connection between our customer experience and our associate experience very early on.
Yeah, it's very target-rich environment for that. And so I think it's a perfect example. And I'm intrigued kind of where you started this journey. You went to one of the most iconic companies in the world to start this journey, didn't you?
We do have a very large healthcare company that we serve, and gave us the opportunity to really look at a significant amount of data very early on. We started primarily with the customer data. We wanted to understand how our customers experienced our service. We started out with several different service lines. As I said, it's everything from plant management to landscaping, planning, design, and construction, safety, emergency management, energy management. And how our customers experience each one of those service lines seemed to be a little bit different. And so that's really where we started, was digging into the customer journey, our service line delivery, and how those played together in the marketplace, and started there and moved on to the associate experience.
Yeah, what was it that kind of triggered that desire? Troy just talked about you got to be collecting both of these sets of data, and then somebody has to start to put them together. What was the impetus? What was the motivation, or the thing that got Medxcel down this journey?
I would say it was a strong partnership that we developed with our HR organization. Early on, we started looking from a sales and marketing standpoint at how we used our associates as brand ambassadors. They're out working in a hospital or a healthcare facility. How do we use those associates to provide us information on how we can grow and how we can better serve our customer? And as we really started building our database of what we knew about our customers and what we knew about our associates, we started recognizing that there were some really strong connections between the two pieces of data, or between the two data sets. And we at that time, we had a director who really felt strongly about digging into that data and finding what those connections were and how we could use those as an organization. And she really lit that fire and started us down this path.
So, but and you're being very modest about your role in all this, because as a C-level executive in your organization, reporting to your CEO, you were one that really got this integrated then in the sort of the business objectives or the business outcomes beyond just the EX-CX connection, but actually what does it mean for the business?
Absolutely. It takes your top leader and your executive team finding that connection and building passion around that, because it is an organizational commitment, not only in allowing the team that's responsible to go out and gather that data, but in really embracing the data when it comes back, because, you know, in the beginning, it's not all great. There's some real ugliness that you uncover in there. And as an executive team, I remember the first time we took the comments from our associate voice survey and we printed every comment on a slip of paper. And as an executive team, we went through and read those comments and sorted them and placed them on a large chart. And we all just sat there and said, there are some things we have to solve here, because our associates are experiencing some challenges, and we see the direct connect to how our customers are experiencing challenges in their interactions with us.
Well, and as you fast forward your journey, and really you had to get started, and you've been at this a lot longer than most the clients I'm aware of. You started to find pockets of excellence, didn't you? And you know, not simply from your central position, but out in like a business line in a particular institution, right? Where they were really doing some unique things that they somehow had felt empowered or had created a better approach for whatever it was that you were trying to do for the customer.
Well, we did. And you know, I think that as you look at the data and you dig into where you see engaged customers and or where you see engaged associates, and you look for the connections, and, you know, we looked at customer relationships, we looked at transactional data with our customers, we looked at associate experience, and we looked at operational data. And we really started looking for where we saw pockets of excellence in all four of those, and what's going on in those accounts that's different than what's going on in our accounts that might be struggling or might not be experiencing levels of operational excellence. And that really helped us identify what we needed to, what we needed to spread throughout our organization in order to see that level of experience in many more sites. And, you know, each year we look to improve the number of sites that are experiencing, what we now classify as sites of engaged excellence that deliver on all of those areas.
Yeah, that is such a great, and it goes back to some of our foundational discussion here on this LinkedIn Live event of having a distributed business model. You really have at least 160 laboratories where you can be out there looking for, as you call it, the sites of engaged excellence, and then be able to transfer that not only from one location to the other, but maybe even across business lines and what have you. So it's just an outstanding story, and thank you. And you really are empowering your people to create a better approach for your customers. And it's just a great story. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Hey, we'll bring you back for the panel discussion here at the end. But again, thanks, Jennifer. I want to get my third guest and final guest in. Ryan Willis is the Director of Experience Management at Lumen Technologies, a fascinating company that I'm going to let him explain to you because I'm not sure I'll do it justice, but it's a fascinating company. And as you can see, his title is actually Experience Manager, which is what we're really talking about here today. So welcome, Ryan. Hey, Ryan, welcome to the LinkedIn Live.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Hey, appreciate it. I'm just really got to know you over the last couple of days or weeks preparing for this program, and I'm fascinated with Lumen Technologies. Can you just briefly explain it? It's a really, really cool company that I'm sure not a lot of people know of, but I think they probably interact with it whether they know it or not, right?
Right. Yeah. Recent brand change. We've been in business for 100 plus years, and we're a communications company, a technology company, our origins being in phone lines 100 years ago, and we're made up of a lot of different companies, a lot of mergers, acquisitions, and so have a lot of history that comes from a different place.
And really what you do is you make all the things that we use electronically today, like websites and apps and sharing data and doing transactions. You make that all work in a safe and fast and reliable way, correct?
You got it. All over the globe, we have over 40,000 employees and customers in all parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, you know, like Jennifer at Medxcel, you too have been a pioneer at connecting the CX and EX data, even to the point where you've even adopted the title of experienced manager. So do you have responsibility for both of those experience areas?
Yeah. You know, I would tell you it's been a journey, Steve. I would love to tell you that we're at a destination, but that's not the case. You know, we started this about 3 years ago here, and it started with really our executive leadership sitting down and being willing to have the conversation that's, you know, that says these two things make sense together, right? Operating separately, you know, and in different worlds is probably not the way to success.
So you really came at it originally from the customer side, correct? But you
Yeah,
were
correct.
able to engage the employee side. How did you just take us through that? Because some of our listeners here today probably are not even, you know, they haven't even really talked to the HR yet. So
Yeah, you know, I tell you the article, Steve, that you guys are sharing, you know, really hit home for me. It felt like home for me, and you know, I'd answer that in two different ways. First, you have to find ways to talk the same language, and really define what success looks like jointly. You know, in big companies like ours, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call work for big companies. Those silos are usually silos because we're measured and rewarded for different things, right? And so we really started by sitting down and talking about, you know, what winning looks like, you know, higher work performance. We talked about discretionary effort, lower turnover, like you have in the document that you shared. And we started to talk about how, hey, we want to drive revenue, we want to be successful. And all of these things, if you really step back and look at them, all start to work together. And we're really trying to achieve the same things. Unfortunately, sometimes we measure them differently or talk about them differently. And we literally sat in a room. This was before COVID, when we could all get together. And we sat in a room and we built a vision and a mission statement together and really started to define what good looks like, right? And what winning looks like. And that was the beginning. That was the foundation.
And this whole exercise has had a tremendous impact on your overall company culture, has it not?
Yeah, definitely. It's really, you know, you start to see the wins along the way. You start to see the breadcrumbs that start to add up. You know, one of the first things we did was just start to listen. Yep. Right? Where we got a question in our employee engagement survey that asked our employees how they felt they were enabled to deliver great experiences. No shocker to probably any of us here, it was one of our lowest performing scores on the survey. It really started to open up our eyes for what the opportunity was.
Yeah, thinking back to some of the comments Troy made early on, you know, the great majority of employees want to do a good job for their customers.
No question.
But sometimes the processes or the resources of the training get in the way. And that's really the noble cause here of linking these things up, is that, you know, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes I get frustrated in a customer experience and I kind of get mad at the person on the front end. And then I try to analyze it. I say, is this person truly empowered? Does this person really have those resources? And that's really what we're trying to accomplish, right? We're trying to create an environment where the people are empowered, have the tools, have the resources to do the right thing for the customer.
Yeah, no question. one of the things we looked at is, we took responsibility for that, Steve, and we said we have to really enable these people to think differently. Whether you're solving a problem that you think is just in your business unit, it probably touches our customers and our employees in some way.
Yes.
There's a degree of connection regardless of where you're at. And so we work to build a practice area to start to teach people to think through journeys, teach people to listen, right? And ultimately take action. We call it our journey management practice area. And it's not just about doing a cool map or getting together and doing that workshop, but it's really the management of it to the end to get results. We've trained 150 champions. We call them our champions, our experienced champions in the company. And every quarter we're bringing more on board. There's a small group of us on our team, and we can't impact the change that we want to in a company this size. So I don't have a better phrase, but we had to teach people to fish, right? We really had to teach people to take, some extreme ownership around owning these experiences.
No, that's going to be one of I think that the points here that we're going to try to emphasize today is there's no reason not to get started on this journey, and you start small and you kind of work on the things that you can impact. But because it's so powerful, as we saw from Jennifer and Medxcel, it really does. It starts to become the norm as opposed to the exception. So, congrats on the work you've done so far, Ryan. I'm going to see if I can pull all three of our guests, and we got a little bit of chat going here that there might be some questions. Let me just throw it out. We'll start with you, Troy, but maybe you could talk real generally about what you might want to do to make, if you have two siloed surveys, what you could do to kind of immediately put it together. And then maybe Jennifer and or Ryan could kind of comment on their experience of how that worked over time. So Troy?
Sure. Now, this has been great to hear. And, I think it affirms one of the things we often tell clients who are wanting to start this process is just, let's talk about both the employee experience and the customer experience at the same time, right? You heard me mention that earlier. Like, if we're doing an executive presentation on our CX survey results and our relationship survey, MPS results, whatever it is, like, use that time to also talk about, well, here's what we're hearing from employees as well. It was simply making that connection where you're not integrating data or anything. You're just acknowledging that both of these things are critically important to how we function as a business. And that often opens up lines of communication to HR or whomever is in charge of that employee function. And then that gets executive attention. And what we're hearing from some of these stories is that is often very important. Having both of these roll up to someone at an executive level or otherwise seems to be pretty important. And so I'd be interested, Jennifer and Ryan, from your standpoint, that ability to have, executive sponsorship of both of these things and that, bringing it together, did it evolve in that fashion in your organizations, or, what was your experience in getting that together?
Let me go to you first, Jennifer, because I think you were kind of that champion originally, but are you at a point now where you present those data sets together frequently?
We do. We annually report out to our executive team across all of the experience channels. So we report our customer data, our associate data, and our operational performance rolled up into an overall health report for our organization. Really gives us a pretty clear perspective on how it all works together out in the market.
And Ryan, you have engineered this at Lumen. Kind of what was the journey like for you? How did they fit together at first, and what have you changed over time to make them work together?
Yeah, in full transparency, we have some more work to do here. We've made some progress, right? Our HR partners have been fantastic. And they got the first question in. We started to hear, feedback from the employees. And we did a simple exercise of starting to marry those two data points together. And I know it's not a shocker to anybody here, but the correlation was almost 1-to-1. Employees that didn't feel like they could deliver great experiences, if you map back to what our customers were saying, they were letting us know that, guess what? Yes, you're not doing a great job. And so we started there. We now have 3 different questions in our engagement survey that dig deeper into that and try and better understand what they're going through. But to get to, I guess, the place that we just talked about, where we're really presenting them together, we still have work to do.
Yeah, and it is a process and it's a journey, and you've emphasized that several times today, Ryan. And no matter how advanced we get, we can't control all aspects of this activity. So it is going to continue to be a journey. But again, the spirit in which we're pursuing this is the right thing to do for customers in this experience economy. And it's why I try to keep making sure that the CX pros out there are so enthusiastic about this. Hey, just a reminder to our listeners, you can enter your questions in the chat. I have a lot of questions for these folks, but let me just, I actually got a question here from Joy, and maybe I'll throw this out to Jennifer and Ryan. But how well are you enabled to deliver great service?
Well, I'll take a stab at that here, Steve. I will say, I think I commented that we started seeing some characteristics of sites that performed really well. And we partnered 3 or 4 years ago with the Disney Institute to come in and help us really understand what those sites did differently than our other sites. It led us down a path of identifying an organization-wide common purpose and set of service standards and leadership behaviors that we then have been able to verbalize, train to, and fully implement across our sites. And, that's really how we've been able to deliver great service, not just at individualized locations, but say that there's a Medxcel way, and that Medxcel way is a high level of service for our customers. And these are the characteristics that define that. Really helped us bring uniformity to our service delivery.
Nicely done. Ryan, you have any comments on that question from Joy?
Yeah, I mean, we first, one of the questions in here was, what specifically did we ask? We asked, we put it back on us. Lumen makes it easy for me to deliver the desired customer experience. And then we had a sliding scale on that. But technically, and tactically, how we got into the enablement, we started partnering with operational teams. We actually wanted to hear from them, so we set up a platform where our front line could share ideas of things that we could do to take action against, to make them, deliver better experiences. And we actually had some great success in our operations team. We executed over 50 different items. I think, to me, it was amazing to see how just small process changes, just really, there's a lot of small things we can all do in our companies to really give our employees that breath of fresh air, right? That ability to go and go the extra mile for our customers. And so that was one tactical way we implemented that.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize this enough. It is the right thing to do. You got to keep going. You got to get going. There's no reason to wait or procrastinate on this, because the entire economy is moving to an experience economy, and that's why our work is so very important. Here's a great question, and it's similar to other flavors I've heard in the past, but Alex says that maybe a HR team is not receptive to sharing some of their information. What might be the message to get the HR guys engaged if they don't want to share with the integration of the employee and the customer data? Jennifer?
I got one.
Okay,
I got
go ahead,
one on
Ryan.
that. Yeah. I think that's pretty normal, right? And I think there has to be some brutal honesty, which is, hey, I respect that you're protecting our employees' sentiment, right? We want that, right? We want our employees to be able to share with us their thoughts and feelings and feel like it's a secure and, confidential environment. And so what we've done is we've instead said, hey, we respect that. We don't want to violate that in any way. But how can we start to share data where we've protected them? And so we started to say, hey, take all of these identifiers off, right? Give us the data in buckets like this to where we don't put any of that at risk. And then let us help show you how powerful this data is and how if you make it work together with the customer sentiment, we can make you look great. We can do great things for our employees and our customers, and we can all win. And I think that was one big hurdle we struggled with getting over.
I'd agree with everything that Ryan said. And I think part of it is building a trusting relationship with some of your HR leaders. Start with a small piece. Maybe it's just one or two pieces of data that you start linking to your customer data. Help them understand that it's not HR versus marketing or customer. It's how do we bring all this together and create a better environment for our associates? And we worked with our vendor partners to help create that story and take it to our HR team and build stronger relationships there. Really pull in all the resources you have and use the data that you have to persuade them and build trust over time.
Yeah, I'd say it's very similar to how we've interacted with other functional areas in the organization over the years. It's important to go talk to those owners of either the functions or the business units, learn from them what their issues are, and as opposed to giving them more work to do, help them see how this CX and EX data can be a lever or a tool in their toolbox to accomplish whatever their overall business objectives are. So again, that's very general. And boy, when we asked for some questions, we got a heck of a lot of great ones here that we will want to categorize and try to address in a future podcast or a future LinkedIn Live, because the questions and comments are coming in rapid fire. But I have to watch the time, and it is a tradition on the CX Leader podcast that we always ask each guest to give their take-home value. That's their best tip on the topic of the day to help our listeners, these CX pros, go back and actually make something happen positively in their program. So we'll go in the opposite order. We'll go Ryan, Jennifer, Troy. But Ryan Willis, what is your take-home value? What's your best tip today?
Yeah, I know, there's easier jobs out there to have. And I think we all know that and we appreciate that. But sometimes getting started is hard. And I have found the best way to start, I know it sounds bad, but or cheesy, but it's to listen. And you can go out and listen to employees and customers and take people with you. Get people to listen. The amount of empathy that builds and the way that starts to change the conversation. Instead of me just telling you should care, you have to hear the pain that people are experiencing, the things that aren't going so well. And that's something any of us can do. You don't need a huge budget. You don't need buy-in from top leadership to get people to listen, but find creative ways to listen.
Jennifer.
I would say, start small, look for places that you can bring the two data sets together. But while you're doing that, build a process of a relationship with others in your organization. For us, we had to build those relationships with our HR team, but also with our operations team. And you really can't bring it all together until you have a pretty high level of trust from one functional area to another. So while you're working from a survey perspective, make it a priority to build those relationships that will allow you to take your survey and your data to the next level.
Troy.
Yeah. So as you may know, I always struggle to just have one piece of takeaway. But
No, you wouldn't have more than one, Troy.
yeah. Well, and I love what you were hearing from these practitioners, this idea of like the shared vision, at a high level, like what is the, what's the experience we're wanting to deliver, and let's get everybody on board with that. And I think that's really important. But I also know a lot of organizations, you might be in a place as a CX leader where you don't have executives on board yet. You don't have that high level of involvement yet. So one way I like to really have a change of thought is around specific interaction points, whether that's a touch point, whether that's a journey that we know are important to customers. We'll jump to, hey, let's listen to the customers, but really what I want to stop and think about more of a 360-degree view around these touch points and say, okay, everyone who's involved in this, directly or indirectly, we should hear from them. So yes, we need to know what the customers think, but we also need to know what the employees who are helping to deliver that experience think, or even, indirectly, the warehouse who's helping to create the deliveries and making sure they get there on time. Thinking about the 360-degree view of that and getting feedback from all of them and listening to all of them. And that way we're actually empowering, employees to tell us things like, hey, I would be able to do this better if you fixed X. And so we can start bringing both things into play.
Nice. And just maybe I'm going to go a speed round here because we had a little bit of extra time here. But I'm looking at the chatter. And again, I'm reflecting on your tips. So, Ryan, you really talked about the importance of listening and creating empathy. Jennifer, you said, in so many words that, every long journey starts with a few small steps and you have to get going. And then Troy, you really talked about, the 360 view, really trying to get to the truth. This is really about building trust, isn't it? Isn't it? And if you're not there yet, then you're probably going to, you maybe don't want to go to the survey right away. Maybe you need to do some more qualitative, or you got to, like Jennifer told the example of how they printed out all the comments from the employees and the executive team sat down. I mean, that's a listening activity. But could you just real quick, lightning round here, Ryan, talk about how important trust is in this whole exercise?
Yeah, I mean, it's key. I mean, if you really start to break down, where we lose with our customers and our employees, it usually centers around that same place. And one thing that we haven't talked about is closing the loop and really showing people that when you listen, that you took action. And I think if there's anything that builds trust, it's when you take sometimes risky, but very intentional things that say, we heard you and we did something about it. Otherwise, you come back to them and you say, hey, care about this, come with me, follow me. And they're like, oh man, I did that last time, Ryan, and we didn't do anything, right? And so we have to be so disciplined around that if we're going to see change.
Jennifer, any thoughts on this concept of building trust?
I think we developed a strategy around storytelling as part of our culture. And we really used the storytelling to celebrate the positive parts of our organization and the positive work that was being done. And so, if you shift the focus to the positive, it allows some of those naysayers to sit back and watch what happens when we celebrate. And we saw them gradually come on board and really built the trust through storytelling culture. We developed a podcast. We developed a rewards and recognition. And we have a monthly newsletter that talks about how we deliver on our common purpose. So really use the positive reinforcement to build that trust. Great.
Yeah, I think, the storytelling is, it it's so much more effective than the charts and graphs, and it makes it real for people. And then, Ryan, your comment about, I think it comes back to something Jennifer said earlier, but you sort of set the expectations of what is the right behavior, and then leadership has to model that, and then you have to reinforce it time over time, and that's how you build that environment of trust. Hey, I was going to give Troy the last word, but somehow the virtual gremlins got him, and that is that's the tough thing that comes with a live event. But Jennifer, Ryan, thank you for sharing your story on this LinkedIn Live, and really appreciate the good work that you've done for both your organizations and your willingness to share it with our audience today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if folks would like to try to get a hold of those two, you can probably we'll figure out a way to get their LinkedIn. You can probably I know you can find them each on LinkedIn because I found them on LinkedIn. Hey, if you enjoyed the program today, drop us a line. We also, if any of these topics were of interest to you, we do have some podcasts that are already out there, both with Troy and with Jennifer. A little more of a deep dive into both of those topics. We have posted the link to the Combining CX and EX report that Troy authored. And we have several other good podcasts coming up. We have a great one out today. I'll just tease it a little bit, but John DeJulius, and he gives you a model for building relationships that is Ford. Like the car, Ford. And I've been using it ever since I interviewed him a couple weeks ago. It's really a great way to think about how you're building relationships with all of your key stakeholders. So be sure to check us out at CX Leader Podcast and cxleaderpodcast.com. And appreciate everybody tuning in today. I think we're back to you, Gabe.
Steve, what a great broadcast, and have to give props to you for doing a great hosting job as always, and teaching me a few things along the way, and hopefully you won't take over my job, but you're pretty stellar. So thank you, Steve.
Well, I appreciate it.
And thanks to our friends at Walker. Thanks to all of you who tuned in, and I also wanted to remind you as well. That you can join us back here November 23rd. We're having an encore presentation of a really great program that we did a few weeks back called Creating a Culture of Belonging. So, if you are interested sort of along this theme of employee experience and, how do I create a more inclusive environment, a more welcoming environment, an environment in which people feel like they belong. We hope that you'll join us here in the United States, in many places around the world. We're celebrating Thanksgiving that week. It's a great time to think about this topic and how we can deliver an experience of belonging for our employees. So thanks to all of you for tuning in, and thank you, Steve, and to all of our guests today.